Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Friday for Females. I'm here with Stacey Randall. Thank you for joining us, Stacey, for Friday for Females. I want to let everyone know that if you have questions or comments, you can put them on, and Stacey and/or I will respond after our interview. So, good evening, Stacey. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. So, we're going to jump right on in. And my first question to you is your journey to your current business is very interesting. And I just wanted to have you share, share how you began it and, your journey.
Well, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. So I knew owning my own business was definitely something I wanted to do. I didn't want to have anything to do with the industry, though, that my family owns their businesses in, which is the restaurant industry, the restaurant and hospitality industry. I think you got to be pretty crazy to decide that you want to own a restaurant. And I can say that because I'm the granddaughter, the daughter, the sister, the niece, and the wife of business owners that were owning restaurants or former restaurant owners. So I have had a lot of experience. My first job was 10 years old, pouring tea and coffee at the tables at my grandmother's restaurant. So a lot. I can carry multiple trays on my arms. Lots of talents here. But I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I liked the ability to kind of call your own shots and to kind of set up your own hours and kind of what that looks like. I mean, it looks a little different in the restaurant world, but I really just liked that concept and that idea, but went off to college, graduated, got into corporate America, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I started my first business, which was an HR consulting firm. And it made it 4 years, but it didn't quite make it to the 5-year mark before it failed. And I learned a lot of hard lessons along the way for that one. And then from there, I went back to corporate America, which is like really hard to do once you've been an entrepreneur and tasted freedom. And so I had an exit strategy and got out as soon as I could and started my second business. And that was 8 years ago, maybe 9 years ago now. And I haven't really looked back in terms of figuring out how to make a business successful. And I think once you've had a business failure, you just have a different perspective on a lot of different things. But that ability to figure out, okay, don't want to go through a failure again. Don't want to go back to having a job for somebody else. And I guess if I had to, I would, but I don't want to. So what does it look like for me to be successful? And just taking those lessons learned and just applied them in growing this second business.
I think that's so awesome. That you took the failure and instead of depressed and pitting yourself in the failure, you took like what you could from it and learned, and then strove for success. And that's really important, I think, for people who are watching, is that failure doesn't mean that you failed unless you allow it to be a failure.
Yeah, I think that's really, so let's be honest. When it happened, it was devastating. And there was a lot of feeling sorry for myself that happened. This isn't something you just like wake up one day like, oh, I failed. And then the next day you wake up like, okay, let's move on. Like, yeah. It's a process, right? I mean, it's a process you go through. But, and people always try to tell me like, oh, your business didn't fail. It was just this major learning opportunity or this lesson to be learned. And I'm like, it's okay to label it what it is. The business failed. It was opened, it paid taxes, it made some money, and then it failed. Like, it's okay to determine that that's what it was. But that doesn't mean, to your point, that the fact that I am a member, I'm a card carrying member of the Business Failure Club, that doesn't mean I'm a failure. And that doesn't, right? That doesn't define, from that perspective, it certainly doesn't define who I am and what I'm capable in the future. It just means that's part of my past, right? I mean, it's just part of something that I had to experience and something that I had to choose to overcome. But definitely, I mean, I'm really big into labeling it what it was, but that doesn't necessarily mean it defines you. In fact, if anything, it's more of a motivation not to land there back again.
Yeah, that's definitely a big one, right?
Yeah.
So everyone, it was very cool because I'm doing an interview with Stacey and I got Stacey's book today. So you guys should get Stacey's book. But your book was on how to gain referrals without asking. And I just wanted to have you give us some insight on that topic.
Yeah. So, of course, the book is Generating Business Referrals Without Asking. It's available wherever books are sold. So, whether you want to support Amazon or your local bookseller, they can get their hands on it for you. But, it's interesting. When my first business failed and I looked back at how I brought in clients, because I definitely had a business that was bringing in clients. It was, earning revenue from that perspective for 4 years. And I had big name clients. Like, if you know anything about the accounting world, like KPMG and BDO, two of the larger accounting firms were clients of mine. Ally Bank was a client. Coca-Cola Bottling Consolidated was a client.
Wow.
So it wasn't like from the outside looking in, you would have thought, oh, she's totally headed for failure. Like you would have thought, oh, her business is doing really well. Like that's really cool, right? But that is not what was happening necessarily behind the scenes. And so when my business failed, I found myself back in corporate America and I decided to do the reflecting, right? I mean, I decided to say, okay, let's figure out what this looked like. Why did I fail? And I looked back at where my clients came from. And I think this, for all the business owners who are listening right now, this is probably one of the most powerful lessons you can do within your business is I looked back and I figured out where were my clients coming from. Now, let's be honest, shouldn't have waited till a business failure to do this reflection. You should be doing it continuously, like every month, every quarter, every year in your business. But I looked back and I was like, where do these clients come from? And I realized they all came from people that I knew. I was in an organization and on a board serving with somebody who, 2 years later decided, hey, yep, we're going to hire you to come in and do work for us. And everything came out of my hustle, my constant networking, right? My constant hustle, like being out there, being known, like growing a network. And I have 3 children. I have 2 in middle school and 1 in elementary school. So you can imagine like 8 years ago, how little those babies were, right?
Yeah.
Or I guess this was 10 years ago now. But if you think about like that was my life. It was a lot of like leaving at night with my husband, getting home from his restaurant, and here I am leaving, and I'm headed off to another networking event, and he's tagging in with the kids. And so it was a lot of hustle. And so when I looked back at where my clients came from, I realized they came because I was working it. I was networking like crazy, or I knew these contacts. Like I knew these people. They were part of my network. So when I started my second business, I was like, I'm tired.
Yeah.
I don't mind networking. I love meeting people. That's a lot of fun for me, but I didn't want to do it all the time. I mean, how many rubber chicken dinners can we eat? And now they're all virtual, which is great,
Yeah.
but it's not the same thing,
No,
right? I
it's
mean,
not.
it's shifted because we've needed it to shift, right? But like networking is, while it can be fun and, fulfilling to meet people and, to be able to talk to people and stuff, it's also very draining the more and more and more you do of it.
Yeah.
And so for me, I was like, okay, business number 2, how are we going to be successful with this? And so I started paying attention to the other ways to generate business. And referrals was like this big, glaring, obvious, why didn't I think of that? Like, why didn't I get any referrals? And I was like, oh, I'm sure I did. So I looked back at business number 1 and I was like, yep, nope, not one single referral. I landed all those clients through hard work and hustle and networking like crazy and knowing people. And so when I started my second business, I was like, we got to grow easier. Like something has got to change for this to work for me. And I wanted referrals like everybody else. I'm like, yes, I want a referral. Yes, I want someone to tell someone to hire me. Like, hey,
Yeah.
I trust you. So you go hire, right? Like, that's what I want. I mean, that's all the clients we all want. Right. And so for me, it was like, great. How do I get those? So like everybody, I went to the all-knowing Google and I was like, how do I get referrals? And all the advice that came up, and there's 3 main dominant pieces of advice that come up, but most of the advice that comes up tells you, well, just go ask for them. And I'm like,
Yeah.
ask who? And ask how many times? And that script sounds weird. And I would never say that. And I feel like I'm like forcing the relationship here. I'm taking advantage of the relationship, always asking for referrals. Or it was like, well, then pay for them. Pay the compensation, pay the kickbacks, do it under the table. Nobody has to know that you're paying them out when they refer you. I'm like, well, when the client finds out that they were paid to be like somebody got paid for them to be referred to me, they'll care. And then the other one was be really promotional and gimmicky. And the type of work that I did, being overly promotional and gimmicky, didn't match with the reputation I wanted to have in the marketplace and how I wanted to be seen. So none of the tactics, which I call old school referral tactics, none of those tactics worked for me. And I was like, well, great. Because then the advice says, well, if you won't do these things, well, then you don't get referrals. And I was like, awesome. Well, this is probably why I didn't get any the first time, right? Because I wouldn't do any of these things. And I'm like, I want referrals. So I'm kind of the type of person who is like, and I know everyone says this is how you have to get referrals, but I'm going to try to get them my own way. And I really guinea pigged on my own business. And I was like, okay, so my second business was a productivity and business coaching practice. And I really just guinea pigged on my own business. And I would start realizing that I was getting referrals. And I was like, okay, well, what is it about that relationship, or what is it that I was doing that was making that referral happen? And in my first year as a business and productivity coach, I brought in 112 referrals that I didn't ask for, and have brought in over 100 referrals every year since. We're going on 8-9 years, whatever it is now. And I realized that there was actually a system and a process to what I was doing, but I didn't know that until my clients that I was coaching from, I was coaching small business owners, and they were there for productivity coaching and business coaching. And they're like, listen, we love your tips of how to manage our inbox. That's awesome. Thanks. But I'd really like to learn your strategy on how you generate referrals. And I was like, oh, okay. So as I started teaching it to my clients, that's when I realized I had to boil it down into a couple of key steps so that I could teach it. And then as I was teaching it to them, I was refining it. And then I was realizing, oh, I do that. And I say this. And oh, it looks like this. And then it created a system, and it created a process. And now we've been teaching this for 8 years, and we've got business owners in 10 different countries all around the world that are actually in our program. It's called Growth by Referrals, but it's where I teach this strategy of, yes, you can get consistent referrals for your business, that even the quality referrals that you want, if you have this system and follow this process, and it will get you referrals, and you will not have to ask, you will not have to pay, you will not have to manipulate, and you can be completely authentic as long as you're willing to invest in the relationships with the people who are going to refer you.
Wow, that's pretty cool though, because it completely is so different, because they're always like, okay, you give the person who referred this, like, the referral codes, and or the prize wheel, and so this is like right, and so this is like completely different from what you're saying. And so I'm super excited to read your book and really get it into the nitty-gritty of it all.
Yeah. And, I always caution people, and I always say, look, if any of the old school tactics work for you, I am never interested in breaking how your business is working. Like, I always tell folks, if you're getting the number of referrals you want, and you're getting the quality that you want, and you're closing more than 50% of them into paying clients, then your system is probably working. Whether you offer a referral bonus or some type of referral program, or you're being really promotional and gimmicky, and you've got all the cheesy things that you're doing, or if you're asking and it's working. Like, if it's working, you need to be the business owner, and you need to make those decisions for your business. I just offer another option for the people who don't want those things, and they're not working for them. So, and there's some industries that I don't do business in, that it's like what I teach is not going to work within how their industry operates, and that's okay. But for the industries where I do operate, it's that ability to know that, hey, I can get referrals, and I can get it in a way that I will enjoy doing it. And of course, I can, keep that relationship going with the person who is referring me.
Well, and it's important to know that there's other ways to actually get referrals with, and for you without asking, we're all so conditioned to the typical way of doing things, that it's good to know that there is another option that's successful, that's working. So at least look into it, right?
Yes.
And if like you said, if what's working is working, then great. And if it's not, well, then here's another avenue. So
right.
I personally like the idea of not having to ask for the referral and still get a referral. I mean, less work. That's even one less step than before. So, so your goal settings are far more in depth than just writing them down. I remember hearing you and talking about goal settings. And can you explain about how you learned about reverse goal setting and that process?
Yeah, so it's so funny. People are always like, wait, you talk about goals and you talk about referrals. Like, those two things could not be further from what they are, right? And I always tell people, who I teach is always the same. I always focus on small business owners and solopreneurs, and I always focus on ways to help them grow their business. So I always like to say it as, I have 3 main professional obsessions, and that is helping you get referrals without asking. It's also helping you build sticky client experiences so that you can actually be referable. And then it's helping you crush your goals. And back when I was a productivity and business coach, I actually used to take my clients away, like on a retreat. We would go away for a weekend, weekend, and they would work on their business instead of in their business. And there was like a series of like how the whole weekend was designed and what we did. And there was downtime and we did wine tastings and things like that. But we did
Oh,
a lot of,
cool.
yeah, we did a lot of work too. And so from that perspective, it was really our ability to like dig into our business. And I started teaching this process of this, what I call reverse goal setting. And I always knew it was different than how a lot of people teach it. It's some people will be like, well, that feels similar to how other people teach it. But when you hear the whole system and how the pieces work together, it just creates a lot of light bulb moments for business owners. And that's specifically who it's for. I mean, I've had people reach out and they're like, I'm an employee. Would your reverse goal setting work for me? I'm like, it would, just not the way I teach it, because I teach it for business owners. But this whole idea, it's like, you know, they always tell you to have a vision board or look really far out in the future and where you want to be. And that's awesome. And I want you to know like that you like, if you're me, then I know that when my youngest, who is in elementary school, ends up in college, I want to sell our home and I want to build a tiny house and I want to live in a tiny house in the mountains. Now, I did just recently learn that my husband has no interest of living in a tiny house with me. He has said we're going to need a couple extra rooms added to that tiny house. But regardless, like I do have like that vision of like what I want it to look like, my future to look like. But that's so far out, right? If it's not somewhat close, I don't have a lot of control over actually ultimately how I'm going to get there. I can think about it. I can dream about it. I can put it on a vision board. But what I really think people need to do is figure out, where do you want to be in 5 years? And we figure out where we want to be in 5 years. The way I teach my reverse goal setting process is we just back into it. We're like, okay, that's where you're going in 5 years. Where do you need to be in 3 years to know that you're on pace to hit the 5 year?
Yeah.
And then if you're on pace in 3 years, that's awesome. So let's back it up one more time. Where do you need to be at the end of next year? So typically I only teach goal setting November, December, and January, because I really find that those are the best months that people are thinking about goals. But the truth is, it's like whenever the moment strikes you and you're like, I should do some goal setting, you're right. You should do some goal setting if you've never done it. So the way that I would teach it right now, here we are in March, right, of 2021, is where do you want to be at the end of 5 years? Where do you want to be and then where do you need to be at the end of 3 years to be on pace for the 5-year vision? We call those the 3-year milestones. And then, great, what does that mean for you by the end of 2021? Where do you need to be in the next 10 months at the end of 2021 to be on pace for 3 years, to be on pace for your 5 years? So you have your 5-year vision, your 3-year milestones, and your 1-year plan. And your 1-year plan becomes effectively your goals for the year. They're all goals, right? But this helps us define and label our goals for this year. And then, of course, I teach a process where we take it and we break them down by category of goals, and then we assign them to a quarter, because I don't care what you think, you cannot accomplish all your goals in first quarter of the year. We think that, and then we're always disappointed because it doesn't work that way. So then we also get really clear about when we're going to say we're going to work on our goals. And then, of course, I have a goal finishers club that kind of comes behind the reverse goal setting process that helps business owners stay accountable. Like, I am the accountability person. They are updating a dashboard at the end of every month saying that the progress that they've made and what that looks like. And so there's accountability to it. But it's all built around this whole idea of like, hey, let's look not too far out, but just far enough out to have a vision and work our way back into it. And that's how I teach goals.
I mean, that's important though. Like, so much we're like, okay, this is what we're gonna do now, and we either you don't project to have a vision, so it's kind of just this like random like, okay, I just want to do this right now, and then you don't look at it macroly to have this like overall goal. Or like you have this macro vision, but then you don't do like the small little objectives that are necessary to get to that, big vision. So I mean, you've encompassed it all, like all the little parts where people sometimes falter. It's like all encompassed in your reverse goal setting. So
yeah,
when
I would say when people kind of think about that reverse goal setting process and kind of how it's built, I think it's because there's really two things that people never talk about when it comes to goals. And number one is what goals actually is work. It's task, it's projects, it's to-dos. And if we can't break it down into the small steps of what we're going to do, we're never going to accomplish anything. Yeah. And the other thing is that the reason why we should never set goals in a 1-year vacuum, like, what do you want to accomplish this year? It's a good question. It's just not the right question. The right question is what are you going to accomplish this year that's taking you where you want to go in 5 years? At least so that, because when like we know it's March, we already feel it. We're like, oh my gosh, where has the first 2 months of the year gone? Like I'm already behind. I was going to get all this stuff done. What I'm not doing any of my goals, right? I said I was going to lose weight, or I was going to do profit first in my business, or whatever it is. Like I haven't done anything. It's because we have to make space for our goals. And if we don't have a plan in place, we don't know what that looks like. We get busy and then we forget about it. But when your goals are attached to 3-year milestones and a 5-year vision, and it's like July and you're like, I don't wanna, at least at that moment, you're asking yourself, okay, are you willing to give up what you said you wanted in 5 years because you're not willing to do the work now? It just gives yourself a different commitment conversation with yourself, which is really important that we have to have.
No, and especially as a business owner, because we're constantly having to think on the fly, like to be able to just step back and say, okay, can I like stop this to do this, or, look at it in a different perspective.
Right. Exactly.
That's, when I did that briefly with you, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like it was just a different way to perceive goals, because I love doing like tasks and goals and like, setting my vision and going forward with it. But to see a different perspective on it and how you portrayed it and how you conveyed it right now was just unique. And I was like, I like this too. It made sense, like logical sense. So,
yeah, I try that everything I do, like once you may have never heard it before and it may be new to you, but the light bulb can go off and you're like, oh, this makes sense. It's the same thing with the referrals without asking, right? I mean, everything I teach is typically a contrarian to how it's taught. I teach goals in a reverse matter, and I teach referrals without asking. And most people are like, that sounds so complicated. And then they hear it and they're like, oh, wait, logically, that makes actually a lot of sense. And because when our brains can like grasp it, that we have such a better chance of actually taking action on it, which is really important to making anything happen.
Yeah, it's like teaching somebody how to run without learning how to crawl or walk first.
That's really hard to do.
Yeah, exactly. So do you have any upcoming events that people can watch or can partake in that you want us to help market right now?
Well, I always tell folks a great place to start is to read my book. I've got a podcast. We drop a new episode every Tuesday. It's called Roadmap to Grow Your Business. And, we do free live challenges within our Referrals Without Asking Facebook group. Towards the end of the year, we'll do some free challenges and trainings in our Reverse Goal Setting Facebook group, but that group's only active for about 90 days, November through January. So there's great places to hop in and get more information and kind of learn what we have going on. We don't have any particular like live trainings coming up on the docket right now. We just finished 2, one in January, one in February. We're taking a little bit of a break. But if they're in the Referrals Without Asking Facebook group, they will learn about all of our upcoming trainings that we have. And, I have on-demand trainings that people can access as well. It's on the training link on our website, which is stacybrownrandall.com/training. But if you just go to, if you're already on the Facebook platform, just go search for Referrals Without Asking, that group, ask to join, answer the questions, and then you'll get in there and you can find all these resources.
Awesome. So you do a lot of workshops and events, etc. What advice can you give to people who want to be requested to do workshops or presentations or become speakers? Like, how do you get on those platforms?
Yeah, it's never as easy as we think it's going to be, right? So it's definitely something I think that you first have to make sure, when you're doing presentations, like I think about when I step on stage to give a presentation, I am as good as I am today because of all of the years that have come before where I've been doing it, right? A lot of experience and a lot of practice. I think that aren't comfortable speaking on stage and you want to do workshops and trainings and presentations, getting a speaker's coach or doing a Toastmasters or something like that can certainly help. When I was younger, I knew I was going to be the next Katie Couric. I mean, that was kind of my expectation. I went to school for broadcast journalism. I knew I wanted to be the next Katie Couric, and then somewhere along the way, I changed my mind, right? And so for me, I'm very comfortable in front of the camera. I'm very comfortable on stage. I think that helps. I think having a message that works, that speaks to the audience works as well. But all those things can be learned. Like that's nothing you can't teach yourself and do with practice to become comfortable with. And so, for me, I started out anytime that I was trying to get more and more speaking gigs. And of course, the ultimate is to get the paid speaking gigs. And most of the time when I speak, it is paid. But I started out in the beginning just doing free ones. Like, will the Chamber of Commerce, will the local NABO Association chapter, will the whatever group I could get in front of and speak to, I could, share what I was doing. And those presentations are never about you. They're about you teaching something to your audience. And it's a way you craft that message to get them to the point where they're like, I learned something and now I want to learn more from her. And so now I want to go and maybe see about working with her or seeing about her programs or whatever it is. That takes time. It takes practice and getting up as many times as you can free. I used to always have this rule with my first business, even the one that failed, the HR consulting firm. And then with the productivity and business coaching practice, I had this rule that for the first 18 months in either of those two businesses, I would speak for free to anybody who asked or anybody who would have me. And then when the demand started to pick up, then I would start to charge. And then now, of course, I speak all across the country and it looks very different now. And now obviously that, different expectations, but I think just as much practice as you can get, because you need people that can speak to you being there. You need the testimonials, you need the speaker's reel, the demo reel of you speaking on stage. So before people will book you and pay you thousands of dollars, right? They need to know you're a known entity and you can do this. But it's, for me, it started out first 18 months and I didn't do it. I did it consciously in the second business. I did it unconsciously in the first business. I was just like, who'll have me? I'll speak, right? Like, just let me speak. And then I got better at it, and then started charging. And then even though that business failed and I moved into my second business, it was the same thing. I was like, who'll let me speak? And then I would go and speak. And then eventually when you're good, they start seeking you out as well. That doesn't mean you don't need to have, a marketing mechanism behind it. But obviously then, of course, as people hear you speak, then they'll start sharing that as well.
Yeah. So what are 5 characteristics of a good leader in your opinion?
Oh, goodness. Just 5. So, I think about this I'm going to answer your question this way, because I think there are a lot of things that a good, strong leader would have, but I think about it from my own core values within my business. And for me, there is this striving for knowing what my priorities are. And I think as a leader of my business, and no matter how little my team is or how big my team is, me understanding what my priorities are and establishing my work and my personal life around that are really important. I am professionally obsessed with my company and I'm professionally obsessed with my topic areas and love being the expert in them. But my number one priority is my husband and those 3 children. And so understanding my priorities, I'm not looking for balance because that's a farce. What I'm looking for is my ability to understand how and when I can engage in both areas of my life, because they're both important to me. So I think understanding my priorities and building my life around that's important for a leader to do, because you can model that to other people. Mm-hmm. Also, I always strive for excellence, and there is nothing about me that is perfect. Not a thing. Even though I'm a recovering perfectionist, there's nothing about me that's perfect, but I do strive for excellence. And I do strive to really make sure that what I'm providing to the people who decide to spend money with me and become clients and within my programs and stuff, that they will get what they need to be successful. So excellence in what I teach. And another big thing is I just care. And I really do think that makes me different from a lot of people out there, is that I really, really care. And I want the people who are doing business with me or just in my community and they've never spent a dime with me, like, I want you to be successful. I don't want anybody else to go through a business failure. I don't want anybody else to be a card carrying member of the Business Failure Club. So I care. And I just think that's just how God made me. And that's just about, who I am. And then another one of mine is actually smart growth. And I think leaders understand how fast they can grow and how much capacity they have and what it looks like. And it's okay. People are like, oh, you could be like a multi-million-dollar business. And I'm like, it could be. But right now, every day my day ends at 2:45 and I go pick up my kids at 3. And so I could be doing more stuff, but I'm choosing to have some different priorities. And so really focused on what smart growth looks like for my company and for me, and not for you, and not how I'm going to be judged, and not how people think it's supposed to look out there in the world, but being really clear on what it looks like for me. And then obviously the number one driver for me is my faith. And that's a big part of who I am. And that's a big part, obviously, of wanting to make sure that I reflect Christ in all that I do and all the decisions and, the decisions that I make, and then how I show up as well. And that's a big part of being a leader too, is staying true to my faith.
Wow, that was pretty impressive there. I mean, you're very authentic, and I love that. You're just so genuine, and I think that's important in a leader, being ethical and being genuine, and that stands out when you are a leader. So
thank you. Well, I mean, also, and I showed up in a hat today on a Friday night, that's as authentic as it gets.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. It's like, it was just very casual, but still so fun and so informative, and I think that's what really stands out. Like, if you can come in and just be yourself, and not have to like dress up and still have that you know, that charisma and that confidence about yourself and what you do. Hey, do it,
Yep,
right?
absolutely. Well, it's
Exactly.
funny. I don't usually work on Fridays. So when you asked me to do this, I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to put on makeup on a Friday. But I was like, but this is what I look like on most Fridays. I'm like, you know what? It's fine. It's all good.
Yeah,
It's all
and
good.
no judgment here.
Right.
So, well, thank you again, Stacey. This was so delightful. We wish you the best of luck in everything. And if you have anything you need us to help out and sharing, just let us know. Well, I say Women on Top, we'd love to help you out. And for anyone else who'd like to be on Friday for Females, please let us know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Bye for now.
Bye.